Your intake person and your paralegal are completely different people. A lot of firms make the mistake of that's the same person. It's not. That would be a big mistake. It's worth it for you to have an idle intake person sitting there answering 6 calls a day than to have your paralegal do it. Well, hello and welcome to the J. Sterling Hughes Show, where we share the straight truth on how we have rapidly grown our family law practice from 0 to 25 attorneys and $15 million in revenue. And my purpose here is to document what's working, what's not working, with hopes that you can take that and you can recontextualize it for your practice and shorten your success curve and grow your firm and have the lifestyle that you're wanting. My guest today is, again, Tom Hartin is back with me. We're following Tom as he's starting his family law practice and leaving big law going into family law. So I'm excited to have Tom back. And I emailed Tom earlier, I think today or yesterday, said, hey, Tom, what do you want to talk about? And he says, hey, one of the things I want to talk about is delegation. How do you allocate work? So that sounds great. So let's jump into that on how we do it, some thoughts I've gotten witnessed around that. So Tom, welcome back, and I'll let you take the microphone from here.
All right. Thanks again for having me, Jeff. And I think you kind of nailed the intro there. So in a typical law firm, yours included, there are a number of different types of team members. You have attorneys, you have paralegals, and you have other staff members. And some of those staff members might be domestic, others might be overseas staff members. And so I was wondering how you allocate that work, in generally how that work is allocated, and in a billable model versus a fixed fee model, how that work is allocated, right? So I was hoping maybe you could walk us through a typical case, starting with intake, ending with resolution of the case, and you can be as granular as you want. Yeah, but basically, what type of work is handled by which members of those teams?
Okay, got it. So as you know, our firm is 100% fixed fee in family law. We weren't always that way. Our first couple of years we did hourly. So I've been able to see our firm on both sides of that fence between hourly and fixed fee. And all of our cases are fixed fee. We have 0 cases that are hourly of the 850 to 900 cases that we have active at any one time. I've got a really big sample size that I look at to be able to kind of share some insights and experiences around this. When I knew you wanted to talk about this, is our firm is not relatable to a lot. So I think there's really 2 ways I can answer some of these questions, is what we're doing today and how we kind of got here, and then also answer when we were smaller and if we were starting out, what would I do differently there, which I think is more relatable to you, obviously, as well as a lot of our listeners as to where they're at. From a standpoint, you asked a lot of questions there to start with, and philosophically, the difference, I should say strategically, the difference between an hourly and a fixed fee is the incentives are aligned around hourly, the lawyer and or the paralegal doing the work that you're billing for the time, you're trading time for the work, right? In our model, where we're paid one fee for an outcome or for a specific amount of time, all of our incentives are aligned around being efficient with that work and having as little done by the lawyer as possible. Today, I think we have 27 lawyers on our team, and they're not uniform across 27 lawyers in how they do their work, but I'm going to try to answer from a distilled perspective as to how the quote typical or the average attorney in our practice handles things. Some attorneys they have a really hard time delegating, and some are just masters of delegating, and so they do as little as possible. That's the most efficient way. Obviously, we want the lawyers doing only what lawyers can do, which generally comes down to giving client advice, going to court, and approving those final forms before they're filed or proposed out. And I say approving because there's no reason why a paralegal can't draft 99.9% of many of those forms. So that's the high level. So breaking it down to our practice, and then I'll jump a little bit from there into if we were starting over, if we were solo like you, how it might be handled. So today, a call will come into our practice, and it'll generally be answered by our intake team. The majority of our intake team sits in the Philippines. We have some here in the U.S., maybe like 4 or 5 teammates here in the U.S., and another 6 to 8 or so overseas in the Philippines. And we really don't differentiate it. They come in, the client comes in, we don't say, okay, you're going to go to US based or you're going to go to Philippine-based. Our teammates in the Philippines, they speak almost perfect English. They're incredibly smart. They do very well from a metrics comparison standpoint. They're on par completely with our team here. And so it'll go there first. Their job
Side question. Sorry, I did not mean to cut you off. How did you find those team members in the Philippines?
Okay, well, I just put out a podcast actually.
Sorry, I was on vacation, so I'm behind.
I got you. No, you're not under an obligation to know all that stuff. I just launched a 3-part series with Robin on our HR team on sourcing. Okay. Yeah. So I just think, Anyway, the short answer is there's a website. I think it's onlinejobs.ph for Philippines, where we source the majority of our teammates there. We also get a lot from just word of mouth and referrals within the team, once they join us. That's kind of how we've done that. But we manage them just like we manage anyone else. They're just as much as a part of our team as anyone else on our team. They come to all of our meetings. They're in all of our group meetings. It's, just how we do it. And our president, Jeff Curlin's actually going over to the Philippines and next month, I believe, to, have some time with them. So we invest a lot there. So the potential client will come in. So at this point, they're what we call a PC. They're a potential client. They come to our intake team. Our intake team will take all the initial information that you would imagine. And their job is to screen them for, do they have a problem that we can help them with? And if we do, there's some other screening questions that they'll ask. And then it shifts from that point, if they're qualified, to scheduling a initial consult with someone on our team. And even from there, they may not go to a lawyer. They may go to a non-lawyer, what we call a CLA for a consult legal assistant. They'll go to them to do that initial consult, where that person will take them all through the process. They'll quote them. They won't give any advice. They can't do that. And that's a rigid kind of a rule that we obviously have to adhere to. And they'll go from there, they'll be quoted. And if they fund, then they'll have a funding meeting with their attorney that they're going to be working with. So they don't really meet the attorney until that funding meeting a lot. Probably 60% of the time, that is how it works. The other 40% they'll actually go from the intake team to the lawyer for that initial consult. And we grade our leads a little bit. So we kind of try to direct the ones that are the hottest, maybe certainly the divorce cases, because those tend to be, they're the easiest, quote unquote, to handle because they're very structured, and they tend to be the most margin and the most dollars involved in that particular type of case versus a post-judgment case or a paternity case. Once the client funds, they now have a team they're working with, which would generally consist of 1 or 2 lawyers, depending on who. So if it's a senior partner, they'll probably have an associate working with them on some capacity. Not always, but a lot of the times. And they'll certainly have a paralegal that they're working directly with. That paralegal may be here in the US, or that paralegal may be in the Philippines. We're working on building that team, our Filipino team, out right now. It's in process. One of our 4 offices is working almost exclusively with the Philippines. The rest of them are. Yeah.
I didn't even know you can have, I knew you had a lot of your intake team in the Philippines. So you have paralegals in the Philippines that are familiar with Wisconsin, or even more granularly, the whatever jurisdiction within Wisconsin, all those laws. Do you have to train them on all that? Or
it's definitely a training process. And they're legal assistants. We don't call them paralegals. We call them legal assistants there. But yeah, that requires training. So we're in 2 states. We're in Wisconsin, Illinois. Each state, they have paralegals that are really experienced that are training them and bringing them up. But there's really no difference. When we hire a paralegal, they don't really know that stuff either. I mean, they don't know the difference between Waukesha County and Milwaukee County, for example, so that they have to learn that. Of course, they know some of the basics on what they're going to learn in legal assistant going through those training courses or PL courses. That's how we handle that from a standpoint of paralegals and legal assistants. We have a hard time finding really qualified paralegals and legal assistants here in the US. So we were forced really from just a standpoint of finding talent by looking in the Philippines. And we've been really pleasantly surprised with the quality that we're able to work with in our team over there. So once the case is underway, we try to have really quality communication, and that may come from the lawyer. More often it comes from the lawyer's support team, just handling the routine basic information. If that client needs to speak with a lawyer for some reason that revolves around legal advice, then they're scheduled usually for a quick call, or the lawyer will call them when they have an opportunity to do that. So we would love, in a perfect situation, to delegate all of the communication that we can to someone that's not a lawyer, because they're busy. Our lawyers are the busiest, right, in terms of what they're doing. And so that's how the work's delegated there. Some from a standpoint of doc preparation and all that, some lawyers are more reluctant, especially the younger lawyers. The younger the lawyer, the more reluctant they are to allow someone else to do document work for them. As the lawyer gets more experienced and more trust in the legal assistant that they're working with or the paralegal they're working with, they'll delegate more and more and more as they go along, especially on routine documents like financial disclosure statements, initial pleadings, responses to pleadings, things of that nature. As you know, the most important document comes at the very end of a divorce, at the marital settlement agreement. And, there you have a mixture of art and just regular routine rote kind of form boilerplate type stuff. And depending on the lawyer will depend on the percentage of work that they delegate to their support team to help them with that. And there's always something in that, almost always in those agreements, that the lawyer will draft because it's a very unique provision that's not in, any other marital settlement agreement, or very few marital settlement agreements. So there's some of that goes on. That's where the lawyer probably does the most drafting work, is at that marital settlement agreement stage, but not always, but that's generally where that's done at. Then the judgment of divorce is very boilerplate too.
So this might be a very general question that's hard to answer, but a typical motion or pleading, I guess, what percentage of that is like boilerplate versus what percent is, the paralegal or the attorney drafting from scratch? And like, what's the average time to prepare something like that? And that's where that might be tough to answer.
Yeah. Like a unique motion on something to modify, like a temporary order or some other provision that needs to be inserted while the case is going, you're talking about. So usually what you have is you have the motion supported by an affidavit. The affidavits are predominantly unique languaging because it's someone's words. The motion itself would have a higher percentage of that being boilerplate, especially if it's a routine issue, but you're going to find unique provisions in that too. So if just eyeballing in, I'm going to say the actual motion itself, which is generally pretty short, is 50 to 70% routine boilerplate type language, and the other part's unique. Affidavit is the reverse of that. It's probably 10% boilerplate, 90% unique wording for that client. It's their words, right, that you're doing there, or the lawyers if that's called for there.
Right. Okay.
You can 80-20 this. In our practice, I'm sure it's probably 90-10. Probably 90% of our forms are very routine, 10% are unique, especially as you have a lot of volume.
Right. And that's where I will struggle in the beginning, is I have none of that.
Yeah, so you're starting off, everything's brand new and unique, right? So
yeah, and I don't have a paralegal, so everything, not only is everything new, everything is me from scratch.
From the standpoint of starting off solo like you are, you're not going to have a support person, so everything is going to be done by you, right? So you're obviously going to want to build your form bank with an idea that you're going to be able to train someone else to utilize that, so it's not all in your head. But in the beginning, you're going to be drafting everything probably, right?
Yeah.
But the quicker you can delegate that off, quicker you can get to the ideal of you're only doing client advice, maybe a consults, and going to court, and the final approval on the docs that's like the perfect spot where you want to be, right? You're the most efficient at that level.
Yep, I agree. I think it's going to take me a while to get there, but I definitely agree with the idea.
Yeah. And it's going to help for you too, Tom, just to do all that stuff yourself, because it's going to help you know how to train your team, your first person that you bring in, that's going to be your paralegal or LA support staff.
That was actually a question I had about you in the beginning. So you, after learning more about you were a family lawyer like back in the day before you went off and started some other business ventures, right?
Yeah.
From 97. I used to think how did Jeff start this family law firm with not only like I'm starting one without any experience, but I'm going to, I'll be doing all the lawyering. Like and my first impression of you was you started this family law firm and didn't do any of the family law work and knew nothing about family law. And my mind was blown, but you did. So that helped, I guess.
It did.
So did you like doing that as an associate?
When I first started, I was super eager to. I just wanted to practice. I mean, $30,000 a year. So I wasn't there for the money. I was there just to learn as quick as I could. Yeah. I was blessed with a really, really good paralegal to start with, and she knew infinitely more than I did. So Jean, if you're listening, thank you. So she was terrific.
Good. And so one other question along a similar vein here. Let's take an average attorney, right? Not your highest performing attorney, but not a new attorney either. How many cases do they typically handle at once? And I guess similar question, like how many do they typically handle in a year? So let's, just to make the math easy, let's assume an average case value of like $10,000.
Yeah.
Per stage. Maybe that's,
I think our average case value is around $9,200 all total. So that's you're not too far off if I'm remembering our math correctly. And the average attorney at any one time will be holding about 40 active files.
Wow.
That's kind of the average.
I just completely guessed, and that was the exact number that
that's a good guess. So, if you're hourly, that's probably too much. I'm sure it is too much to give good quality service. The higher the caseload, what we have found over and over again is a very direct correlation between the higher the caseload, the more challenging the client service scores are, what we measure by with NPS, Net Promoter Score. So we have attorneys with a lot more cases than that, and not all of them, but generally you're going to see that their NPS scores are lower, their client service scores are lower because they don't have enough time and bandwidth to really communicate well with all of them. Communication is the name of the game. It's not legal outcome at all. It's like that's very little. It's almost exclusively the experience in family law. So the experience and how the client felt counts for everything, not necessarily the outcome. The outcome variance between attorneys is actually pretty small, quite frankly, because you have the courts there to mediate that, and if they're going to decide. So there is definitely variance, but it's not as big as you might imagine, but it's that client experience. So the average in our firm is about 40. Younger attorneys have less, more experienced attorneys have more, as you can imagine. At any one time, we've got 850 to 900 files active, spread out over. It's tough here because not every attorney is exactly in the same place. About 25. I think we just hired 2 more attorneys recently, so they have like no cases right now. Some younger attorneys have 15 or 20. Some are leaders, and they have, like Holly and Katie, 2 of our managing partners. I think they have around 15 to 20 files right now, whereas a senior partner will have 55 or 60.
Okay. Yeah, I remember I heard you had someone, I forget the name, on your podcast that did like 1.2 million a year or something, which is mind-blowing.
We've got an attorney right now averaging 114,000 in a month. So she's going to blow that number out of the water.
Wow.
I just looked this morning, actually, on a 6-month rolling average. She's at that. She's got a big caseload. She's a really, really good attorney, and it's incredible. She's obviously super duper efficient, and she works a lot more than we would like. She works really hard. Yeah, she needs to she probably doesn't have the balance that she needs right now. So
yeah, if the average attorney is handling 40 cases at a time, you can answer this question either way. Like what's the average lifetime of a case? Or I guess the better way to answer it is how many cases do they handle in a year?
You can essentially double that number.
Okay.
I think that's about right. I'm going off of old memory here, Tom, so forgive me if that math is obviously not checking out. So in a given year, let's say we've got 2,750 to 3,000 cases, 2,800. Let's just say at that. That's probably closest to being accurate. So that means they're turning over about 3 times in a year. So maybe it's more than that. Maybe it's closer to 100 that an attorney will 100 to 120 in a year. A lot of cases are super short. They may just be a short fixed fee, like for like 30 days just for one hearing, and some will be a divorce that'll go a year and a half.
Okay. So
I'm blending all that together. I mean, we'll even have some that'll over in a day. So it's blended together.
So when you say your average case value is, I think you said 9,200. So that includes those short cases that are.
Yep. Yeah.
And I guess that also includes some outliers that go on for 4 years. Do you have numbers on what a median like divorce cost is? And if you don't, we can cover that on another podcast.
Let me get back to you on that. I don't want to just share a number out there and be guessing.
No, I agree. But average case value. Yeah. If you're getting a certain amount of cases that last a day or less than 30 days, I think that average case value gets pretty skewed.
Yeah, let's say that for our next podcast. I'll get those numbers in front of me so I don't quote really bad stuff.
That was it for this one. That's just really, helping me and others know like what to shoot for. So if I want to have 40 active cases at a time, again, same as you, I don't want to do math off the top of my head, but how many should I shoot for in a month to bring in new clients in a month, especially if I'm pretty new and assuming things are going to take me longer than they would a trained attorney at your firm. Mm-hmm. And I don't know, I still have many different thoughts on how I'm going to handle this. Like do I cap the number of clients I sign, or do I just say, hey, I'm getting a ton of calls. I don't care that I'm in month 4, I'm hiring somebody, which sounds appealing, but I don't know. We'll see.
I hope to continue to mastermind with you as you walk through that and have to face those decisions, because those are really tough.
Yeah.
Tough calls, because now you're going to hire someone. Now you've got a whole different set of obligations.
Yeah. Well, I think, a first hire would be a paralegal. I think, like we just mentioned. So that, I might be able to.
I don't know, Tom. I think your first hire is someone that's going to answer your phones.
Maybe an intake.
Yeah.
Right.
Yeah. Or unless you have a really good outsource partner on that, because that's a key critical role. If you don't have clients coming in, you don't have oxygen, you're not breathing.
Yeah. I guess, I don't know. As of right now, it's I'm going to be doing my own intake. I think it's good for me. And we've covered this before, good for me to do. And I think I can do it. I can do it well. And I'm not really busy right now, so I can do it. But yeah, eventually I'll get busy enough where that will be tough.
Your intake person and your paralegal are completely different people. A lot of firms make the mistake of that's the same person. It's not. That would be a big mistake. It's worth it for you to have an idle intake person sitting there answering 6 calls a day than to have your paralegal do it.
Right. But I have to get up to a certain call volume for that to make sense.
Oh, for sure.
If I'm getting, 5 or let's say 6 calls a week, and I can sign 2 a week, it might make sense for me to hire a paralegal so that I can accept all those cases. Whereas I can still answer 6 phone calls a week. Yeah,
you'll get more than that, but a lot of them will be not qualified.
You keep saying that, Jeff. I hope you're right.
Oh man, I know how the internet works and how quickly it could go. So you're going to find that getting the attention of clients and getting clients from the online will be the easy part of your practice. It's the easiest part of our practice. It's the other parts that are way harder. And most attorneys think it's the opposite. Most of them think, oh man, marketing seems so scary and esoteric to me. I don't know how the internet works, all that. That's not the case. Once you get into it, it'll be the easier part of your practice.
I hope you're right. I don't know. I've been in big law 8 years, just having work fed to me. So it's not something I've ever even had to think about.
Yeah.
So it's totally new, but that I'm excited about that part. When you think about, as you grow, what type of work do you want to delegate and what type of work do you want to keep, right? That's one of the exciting parts about growing. I think doing like the marketing and like the client intake part is probably like seems like the most fun. I don't know. I haven't done it yet, but
yeah. I love the marketing part and I love the sales part, the consult. I love that.
Yeah, that's exactly. Yeah. And
the final negotiations are fun to me too. I just love that, the gamesmanship and the fun that helping a client be done and move on, because that's what they want, Tom. That more than anything, they want to be out of court. They don't want to be there. That's painful. They want to be, they won't come in and tell you that. That's not the first thing out of their mouth. First thing out of their mouth is how they're feeling, what they want from a real easy to identify perspective, but it's the hard thing underneath all of it is I just want to be out of pain. Court is pain. Dealing with you, Mr. Lawyer, is pain. I want to be gone and move on.
Yeah. Right. Okay, cool. So I think next time, so now we covered like how many cases an average attorney handles. I think next time we're going to cover how attorneys and other members of the team are compensated. So that will be a cool one to discuss.
Yeah, it's fun. Cool. All right. See you next time.
All right. Thanks, Jeff.
Bye-bye.